Mrs. Black.
I'm proud, Minister, to be here alongside my Civil Engagement Group colleagues, and I'm pleased to second this important and timely motion. Senator Ruane has already outlined many of the devastating facts about this crisis and the ways that the EU institutions are complicit in human rights abuses suffered by refugees. And I want to speak about the lethal practice of pushing back refugee boats and my disappointment with the government's counter-motion. And the drowning of hundreds of refugees after the sinking of the Adriana ship off the Greek coast a week and a half ago should have been more shocking than it actually is. It should have instigated a Europe-wide reckoning with the cruelty of our border regime and the rampant illegal behaviour of certain EU member states in their treatment of people fleeing war, deprivation and injustice. But unfortunately, it has not. Mass death on Europe's sea borders have become routine. I'm very concerned about a whole ecosystem of bureaucrats, politicians and media figures that are peddling alarmist disinformation about the migrant crisis with the goal of hardening people's hearts and securing resources and political consent to construct and maintain a militarised, racist border policy. The government's counter-motion speaks about a European policy of breaking the business model of people smugglers. And this is absolute nonsense. The business of people smuggling has emerged because desperate people can't travel to Europe and make asylum claims or to reunify with family through conventional legal means. Seeking asylum is a right under the International Refugee Convention. EU member states have tried to curtail that right by putting physical and administrative barriers in between refugees and the sites where they can claim asylum. And as detailed in Sally Hayden's journalism, some of the guards in these EU-funded detention centres that Senator Ruane mentioned are themselves involved in smuggling. Europe's repressive, exclusionary policies have created the massive market for people smuggling. And the only way to end this practice is to create a humane, legal pathway for people seeking safety. The government's counter-motion strips away any mention of EU member states or Frontex documented engagement in the pushback of migrant boats. These pushback operations, which have been documented by NGOs like the Greek Refugee Council and reported in reputable news sources such as the New York Times, the New Yorker and the Guardian, these pushback operations risk the lives of migrants and violate the principle of non-refoulement, which is a key provision in the international law governing refugees. The Greek Refugee Council has taken legal action in relation to 11 different pushback incidents. Greece has removed people from its coastal territory despite interim court orders forbidding them to do so. The Greek Refugee Council has recorded instances of physical and sexual violence as well as unlawful informal detention employed during these pushback operations. The Greek Coast Guard and Frontex are leaving boatloads of people stranded in horrific, dangerous conditions. Not only are European institutions failing to provide adequate search and rescue, they're actively making an already dangerous situation worse. The government's counter-motion promises that Ireland will be a voice for upholding refugee human rights and international law within EU institutions. How can it credibly claim this if they're afraid or unwilling to name the bad actors implicated in human rights abuses and illegality? In lieu of mentioning the actors implicated in these illegal pushbacks, the government's counter-motion claims that the government will continue to support the mandate of the UN Special Rapporteur on Migrants. Well, I just want to outline the issue in his own words. In Greece, pushbacks at land and sea borders have become de facto general policy. So the government's counter-motion doesn't appear very supportive of the Special Rapporteur to me. The government's reticence to speak about the illegal actions of Frontex and the Greek and Italian Coast Guards, amongst other organisations, is made all the more bizarre when all 13 of Ireland's MEPs, including members of all the government parties, have collectively signed a letter organised by Oxfam requesting the European Commission to take action to stop the illegal and immoral activity. In March, the Council of Europe's Committee for the Prevention of Torture's annual report found that during pushbacks at European borders, guards use inhumane and degrading treatment, such as firing bullets close to the person's bodies while lying on the ground, pushing them into rivers, removal of their clothes and shoes, and forcing them to walk barefoot, even fully naked, across the border. The use of unmuzzled dogs to threaten or even chase foreign nationals, and deprivation of food and water for prolonged periods. These reports add to the significant body of evidence gathered by the EU's Fundamental Rights Agency, the Council of Europe's Committee on Migration, and several other NGOs, including Oxfam, Médecins Sans Frontières, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. The human rights abuses that our motion highlights are happening in plain view across the Mediterranean. Journalists, lawyers, activists and NGO workers are doing unbelievably heroic work to highlight this illegal behaviour and to provide practical aid to people in acute need of support and compassion. The bare minimum the government can do is acknowledge the reality of this situation. The counter motion fails even that modest test. This is profoundly disappointing, Minister. Standing up for the principles of human rights and international law in an increasingly lawless, cruel and racist European political environment requires courage, but it's the right thing to do. So I ask the House here today to fully support our motion and get behind it. Gur míle maith.